She flinched when the door opened, froze when her manager passed, and smiled like nothing was wrong, but someone saw the truth hiding behind her eyes. 5 silent signs, 1 watchful stranger, and a choice that would change everything. What happens when quiet pain meets unexpected courage? If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you are watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. It was a Thursday afternoon filled with gray skies and the promise of rain, the kind of day that made everything feel quiet. Inside the Cornerstone Cafe, the smell of cinnamon and fresh coffee filled the air. Customers moved in slow motion, buried in laptops or quiet conversations. Nolan stepped inside with his usual calm. He carried his son Mika's backpack in one hand and a stack of lesson plans in the other. He had just dropped Mika off at his art club down the street and came here to work in peace. Nolan was a part-time English tutor and a full-time single dad. He had learned to juggle both roles with a quiet strength. He ordered his usual black coffee and took a seat by the window. Outside, raindrops tapped gently against the glass. Inside, the world was still. He opened his laptop, but before he could focus, his eyes were drawn to someone behind the counter. Her name tag read Lydia. She looked young, early 20s at most. She moved with the careful grace of someone who didn't want to be noticed. Her steps were light, her smile small, her eyes tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. It was something deeper. Nolan watched as she handed a coffee to a customer, thanking them politely. But her smile disappeared the moment they turned away. She wiped the counter, her hands moving automatically like she wasn't really there. Nolan had seen this look before. It's not from a stranger, but from his late wife, during the worst of her days. That memory stirred something inside him. Then it happened. A man in his 40s, wearing a dark green apron, walked behind the counter. The shift supervisor, maybe. When he passed by Lydia, she flinched. It was slight, but Nolan noticed. Her shoulders tensed. Her jaw tightened. She stepped back like she had just brushed against something sharp. Nolan looked down, unsure if he was imagining it. But moments later, another sign appeared. A customer dropped a few coins, and one rolled under the counter. Lydia bent down to pick it up, but not before glancing around quickly, like she was checking if someone was watching. Her eyes landed on the man in the apron. It's only when he turned away did she move. Nolan shifted in his seat. He tried to focus on grading papers, but the feeling in his chest wouldn't leave. Something was wrong. No one else seemed to see it. The door chimed as another customer entered. Lydia froze for a second. She quickly gathered herself and smiled again. But it didn't reach her eyes. Nolan sipped his coffee. He watched her posture, her movements. She wasn't just tired. She was scared. His thoughts were interrupted by Micah's drawing pad, which had slipped from the backpack. Nolan picked it up and smiled at the superhero scribbled on the page. A small reminder of innocence. He looked back at Lydia and wondered how long she had been carrying whatever it was she wasn't saying. Then came the 4th sign. The man in the green apron walked behind her again. This time his hand brushed against her lower back. Too low to be casual. Lydia froze. She didn't say anything. Her face didn't change. But her entire body stopped moving. Nolan's chest tightened. Minutes later, another barista walked by and asked if she was okay. Lydia whispered, "I'm fine." But she clutched her arm with the other hand, and in that quiet, restrained motion, Nolan saw sign number 5. He leaned back in his chair. The rain had started outside, soft and steady. Inside, the cafe hummed with music and the clink of cups. But Nolan's mind was far from peaceful. He remembered his wife, Anna, and how she once told him that pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it hides behind politeness. Lydia reminded him of that, and that scared him. He didn't want to assume anything. He didn't know her story. But the signs were there. 5 quiet, painful signs. And now he couldn't unsee them. He looked at Micah's drawing again. standing tall with a cape fluttering in the wind. Below it, written in crooked crayon letters, were the words, "Be kind, be brave." Nolan closed his laptop and folded his hands. He wasn't sure what he would do yet, but one thing was clear. He couldn't just sit and watch. Not again, the next. Morning brought brighter skies, but Nolan's thoughts still felt heavy. He couldn't shake what he had seen the day before.
I have 5 small moments.
5 clues, each one quiet, but together they spoke loudly. He tried to tell himself he didn't know the full story, but deep down, he knew enough. After dropping Micah off at school, Nolan found himself walking back toward the same cafe. It wasn't part of his usual routine, but something inside him told him to return. Maybe it was worry, maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just a feeling he couldn't ignore. The cafe looked the same. Warm lights, soft music, people chatting over lattes. Everything looked normal. But normal didn't always mean safe. He took the same seat by the window and opened his laptop. He didn't plan to stay long. He just wanted to check in, not with words, just with his eyes. Lydia was behind the counter again. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her apron was clean. Her smile was exactly the same as before. Small, polite, controlled. But today, he paid even closer attention. She handed a customer their drink, smiled, and turned away. As she walked back toward the counter, she glanced behind her. Look, it was a careful one, like she needed to know where someone was standing. A few minutes later, the same man from yesterday came out of the back room. The one with the green apron? He didn't speak to her, didn't even look at her, but she still reacted. Her shoulders tensed again. She turned her body slightly away. Her hands fumbled with the lid of a cup. Nolan watched, heart beating faster. It was all so quiet, so hidden. But once you knew what to look for, it was impossible to miss. She dropped a spoon. Not a big deal. But the way she quickly bent to pick it up, then stood up and looked around, told a different story. She was checking. Always checking. Always. Aware as customers came and went, she never relaxed. Not once. Her movements were sharp, careful, and when the man passed close to her again, she held her breath. Nolan could see it. She didn't flinch this time. But the tension in her neck gave her away. He closed his laptop. He hadn't typed a single word. He looked at the other people in the cafe. No one seemed to notice. They sipped their drinks, stared at their phones, smiled at each other. But none of them looked at her the way he did. Maybe they didn't want to see, or maybe they saw but didn't know what to do. Maybe they were just too distracted by their own lives. Nolan leaned back in his chair and took a slow breath. He remembered a time years ago when his late wife Anna had confided in him. She had worked at a small shop back then, and for months she had felt uncomfortable around her boss. But she never said anything. Not until it had gone too far. And even then, no one believed her right away. He had promised himself that if he ever saw the signs again, he wouldn't look away. The cafe door chimed again, and like clockwork, Lydia stiffened. She turned slightly, then forced a smile. It looked like she wore it like armor. Okay, a mask she couldn't take off then. Something unexpected happened. Another customer accidentally bumped into the man in the green apron. Nothing serious, just a clumsy moment. But Nolan saw how quickly the man's mood changed. His face tightened. His voice got sharp. Not loud, just cold. And Lydia, she froze again. She didn't even look up. She just stood perfectly still, like if she didn't move, maybe she wouldn't be noticed. Nolan's heart sank. He wasn't imagining it. Something was wrong here. And it wasn't just about a bad boss or a tough job. This was fear, hidden under. Routine buried beneath politeness. As he sat there, lost in thought, his phone buzzed. It was a photo from Mika's teacher. Picture of Mika holding up a drawing of a giant robot with the words "Be Someone's Shield" written above it. In bold, wobbly letters. Nolan smiled sadly. Even at 6 years old, his son understood something many adults forget. You don't have to wear a cape to protect someone. Sometimes you just need to pay attention. He looked back at Lydia. She was refilling the napkin holders now. But her eyes kept flicking to the man near the back. She never looked fully relaxed, never truly present. Nolan made a quiet decision. He wasn't sure how, or when, but he would speak to her, not in a pushy way, not to demand answers, but just to say that someone noticed, someone cared, because the signs were there, and they were signs nobody else seemed to see, but he did, and he couldn't ignore them anymore. The wind had picked up that afternoon, leaves scattered across the sidewalk like they were trying to escape something. The clouds hung low, thick and heavy, as if they were holding back more than just rain. Nolan sat in his usual seat near the window of the cafe, but today he wasn't working. His laptop was closed. His coffee sat untouched. His eyes were fixed on the counter where Lydia worked. She moved like she always did, quiet, careful, never rushing, never truly resting either. He had been coming back every few days, not to confront her, not to push, just to be there, to watch, to make sure she wasn't completely alone. Today felt different though. Something in the air felt colder. Not the weather. The mood. Lydia looked paler than before, her eyes heavier. She dropped a cup lid and didn't even bend to pick it up right away. She stood still for a second, and quickly reached down as if snapping out of something. Nolan's heart tugged. He'd seen enough. And the longer he waited, the more it felt like silence was a kind of permission. A few minutes later, Lydia wiped her hands on a towel, hung up her apron, and walked out the side door into the alley behind the shop. Her break had started. Nolan stood slowly. He grabbed his coat, tucked his phone into his pocket, and walked outside, following the narrow path that curved around the building. He didn't rush, didn't want to startle her. She stood near the back wall, arms folded across her chest. Her face was tilted down. The wind tugged at her hair. She didn't hear him at first. Nolan stopped a few feet away. Not too close, not too far. "Hi," he said gently. His voice calm and kind. Lydia looked up quickly, her eyes wide, surprised. "Sorry to bother you," Nolan added. I wanted to say something. I promise I'll leave you alone after." She didn't move. She didn't speak. But she didn't walk away either. He took a breath. "I've been here a few times," he said. "I noticed you. Not in a weird way, just how quiet you are, how careful you seem. And yesterday, you looked uncomfortable. Again, maybe I'm wrong, but it didn't sit right with me." Her eyes welled up instantly. She blinked fast, but a tear still escaped. Nolan raised his hand slightly, palm out. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know. Something is going on. You don't deserve it, and you're not invisible." For a few long seconds, she didn't move. Then, as if a wall inside her finally gave in, she nodded. "Just once. You're the first person who's noticed," she whispered. Her voice shook like a branch in the wind, or at least the first one who said something. Nolan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small card. It was nothing fancy, just his name, phone number, and a message written in soft handwriting. "You are not alone." He held it out. "I know a few people," he said. "Safe people. Support groups. Folks who listen. If you ever want to talk or report anything, I'll help you. No pressure. No judgment." Lydia looked at the card. Her hands trembled as she took it. She clutched it like it was the first solid thing she'd held in a long time. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood there for a moment, letting the wind blow between them. Nolan didn't press her. He didn't ask for details. He had said what he needed to say. Finally, she looked up at him, her face still sad, still scared, but something had shifted. Her eyes weren't as empty. There was a flicker of something new. Maybe not hope, but maybe the start of it. "What's your son's name?" she asked suddenly. Nolan smiled. "Micah," he said. "He's 6. He thinks everyone should be a superhero." A small smile tugged at her lips. "He's right," she said softly. Nolan nodded. "You don't have to fight alone," he said. "Whatever's happening, someone will listen, even if it's just me." She looked down at the card again, then carefully slid it into her coat pocket. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I hoped for," Nolan replied. They both stood in the cold for a little while longer. Then Lydia took a slow breath and turned to go back inside. Her shoulders were still tense, her steps still cautious. But there was something different in the way she walked. Nolan stood in the alley a moment longer. He looked up at the gray sky, then turned and walked the other way, heading back toward the front of the cafe. He didn't know what would happen next. But he knew this moment mattered. Kindness doesn't always fix everything, but sometimes it opens the door. 3 weeks had passed since that cold afternoon behind the cafe. The memory of it stayed with Nolan, replaying in small flashes when he least expected. The quiet alley, Lyda's trembling voice. The card exchange between two strangers in a moment of truth. He hadn't seen her since Nolan still visited the cafe now and then, not every day, just enough to feel connected. The baristas had started to recognize him. A few even smiled when he walked in with Micah, who always carried his superhero sketchbook under his arm. This time, the air was warm. The sun peeked through scattered clouds and birds chirped like the world had pressed restart. The cafe felt brighter than usual. The windows were open. Laughter bounced between tables. It felt alive in a new way. Nolan stepped inside with Micah beside him. They ordered their usual drinks. He glanced toward the counter, expecting to see Lydia, but she wasn't there instead. A new girl with curly hair and a kind smile greeted them. She handed Nolan his coffee, then paused for a moment. Her eyes scanned the counter, then landed on a small folded paper tucked beneath the register. "Are you Nolan?" she asked softly. He nodded, unsure what to expect. She smiled again. "She asked me to give this to you, in case you ever came back." She slid the folded note across the counter. Nolan stared at it for a moment. His hand shook slightly as he picked it up. He and Micah sat by the window. Nolan opened the letter slowly. The handwriting was neat and careful. "Dear Nolan, you probably didn't know, but the day you spoke to me, I was at my breaking point. That morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and asked myself if anyone would notice if I just disappeared. I felt invisible, small, afraid. Then you noticed you didn't ask for details. You didn't push. But your words made me feel seen. You gave me a moment of safety when I had none. That night I told my sister everything. She believed me. We called a lawyer. We contacted the company. There was an investigation, and finally someone listened. The man is gone now. They offered me a different position, but I said no. I needed a fresh start. Next week I begin a new job at a community center. I'll be helping teenagers with art therapy and writing workshops. And thanks to you, I've started something else too. It's a blog, a space for girls like me. It's called Quiet Bravery. We share stories, fears, healing, and hope. You didn't just help me that day. You helped others who may one day read those words and realize they aren't alone. Please tell Micah that he was right. Superheroes are real. They don't wear capes. They carry coffee. They notice with all my heart. Lydia. Nolan sat in silence for a long time. His coffee had gone cold, but he hadn't touched it. He looked out the window at people walking by, some laughing, some lost in thought. Most unaware of the ripple that had begun in this very spot, Micah leaned against him, sleepy after a long day at school. He hadn't read the letter, but somehow he understood the moment was important. "Dad," Micah whispered. "Did someone write you a story?" Nolan smiled softly. "Yeah," he said. "A really brave one." He folded the note carefully and slid it into his coat pocket. He would keep it, not just as a memory, but as a reminder that paying attention matters. That small acts of kindness can grow into something much bigger. As they stood to leave, Nolan noticed something new near the front counter. It was a small poster pinned to the wall. The top read, "Safe spaces start with kindness." Underneath, a website link, www.quietbravery.org, and at the bottom, in smaller letters, "If you see someone hurting, don't look away. Your voice could be the one that helps them speak." Nolan blinked back tears. Micah tugged on his hand. "Ready to go, Dad?" Nolan looked around the cafe one last time. It felt different now. Warmer. Safer. Like something had been cleared out. and something better had taken its place. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go." As they stepped out into the golden afternoon, the wind was calm. The sky was open. Somewhere, in a different corner of the city, Lydia was beginning again, not broken, not lost, but brave.